What is up, people? So today, this will be my second installment of 3 questions. I went on Instagram and said, hey, the first people that direct message me, I'll answer your question on YouTube, give you a shout out, so that's what I'm doing. And I'm trying to think about these questions as little as possible. This is totally off the top of my head. None of this is super planned out. I wrote your questions down, wrote who asked, and then I jumped on here. And these are all themed around jazz. So if you're not into jazz, before you leave, whatever I say will probably apply to any and every musical genre. So, even though I'm just strictly talking about jazz, you can pretty much apply these to anything. So don't get freaked out by jazz. Whatever genre you're into, metal, funk, rock, country, you can think about these concepts in those genres just as well as jazz. But since I have my jazz set up, I figured I'd talk about jazz. So, I've been getting a lot of questions about this ride cymbal, by the way. It is an Istanbul Agop signature ride, 24-inch. So, for those of you that were wondering. All right. Fancy little piece of paper here that'll tell me. Okay, so the first question is from Nels. I'm not even going to try to pronounce. It's around here somewhere. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. And he was asking about jazz comping and struggling with comping and doing more than one hit. So in jazz, when you're comping, that typically is what you're doing behind a soloist or during the melody of a song. So basically, you're not the focal point. We're not talking about soloing or trading fours here. We're talking about when a soloist is, doing their thing, what are you doing behind them? And jazz, most of us know, the ride cymbal is the most important thing, right? The typical swing jazz pattern that's super important, right? So, you want to keep that going. That still needs to be the focal point. That's where the groove is, right? The groove in jazz is in the ride cymbal. So when you're comping, and a lot of people, I'm not a genius for saying this stuff. A lot of people have said this, but this is what I think about. From what I've heard from people, this is always what I try to think about when I'm comping. Keep it simple and stay out of the way. Your point, the whole thing you're doing when you're comping behind a soloist or the melody is to support what someone else is doing. So it's totally cool if you can play a bunch of triplet stuff and whatever, but to me, it's all about dynamics, right? So, and then doing more than one hit, it's partly just a coordination thing, right? So if you want to take this simple, we'll do a simple comping pattern of, with swing time, 2 and 4 on the hi-hat, we'll do a simple comping pattern of da 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 da, right? That'll be the theme. I won't play all of those notes the whole time, but I'll comp how I would behind a soloist, playing around that comping idea. 2, 1, 3, 4. Okay, so comping, you want to mix it up. That was pretty straightforward. I was playing the same rhythm over and over again. So you'll want to have a varied amount of rhythms, but I think, to me, it's practicing the coordination, but then really getting the dynamics down, right? I can play that same comping figure, but then play with less dynamics, and it'll sound like this. That's not what you want. That's going to be really loud, that's going to be really distracting, and now you're not really supporting, you're playing a figure. So when I play really quiet, and I play all those rhythms really quiet, it doesn't force the soloist or the person playing the melody to follow what I'm doing. And they can respond to it if they want, but if not, it's just me comping doing that thing. But if I play that really loud and really forcefully, then they kind of have to like either get on board with what I'm doing, and now it's their solo, but now I'm forcing my will and my idea and my rhythmic stuff over what they're doing, and that's not what you want. So part of it's just coordination. Go through Ted Reed's Syncopation, go through that book and work out the coordination of when things line up. But then I would say for comping and playing more than one note, really, really focus really hard on dynamics, inner dynamics. The ride cymbal should be the grooviest thing. Hi-hat shouldn't be don't smash the hi-hat on 2 and 4, right? It should just be chugging along. It's just there for support, right? And then between the kick and snare, just make sure that you're paying attention to dynamics. You don't want your kick drum to be too loud and boomy, and you don't want all your snare drum notes to be loud rim shots, right? So that's the first question. Jazz comping and playing more than one hit, I'd say it's all about dynamics, and then if you need, working out some coordination in the practice room so that you're confident and you have enough rhythmic vocabulary to get through it. Okay, fancy piece of paper. Question 2. I can trade 4s, but an entire course is more difficult, and this comes from Cameron Simmons. So, soloing. Trading 4s is great, right? So in jazz, when you're trading 4s, you and another instrumentalist, whether it's a saxophone player, piano player, guitar player, whatever, you are trading 4 or 8 or 2 bar solos, right? So they get 4 bars and then you get 4 bars to solo. And that is easier because I would say you can rely a little bit more on your tricks, right? If you're going to trade 4s and you only have 4 bars, you can kind of just blaze something quick around, and it is what it is, right? But when you have a whole course, I always think, this applies to trading 4s, but I think it's really important when you have an extended solo, whether it's a 2-minute open solo or it's a whole 16 bars, 32 bars of a song, to slow down, allow space, right? We all want to, we're so scared of silence, right? So instead of, when you're soloing for 16 bars, instead of thinking, okay, what lick am I going to go to? How am I going to start this? What if you just hit a big crash cymbal on the and of 4 and then let it ring for 2 measures? Well, now you only have to think about 14 bars, so that's nice. But 2, it broke, chances are you're coming off of a solo, so chances are the audience has just been listening to someone solo for, a couple of minutes. To let them breathe and say, oh, okay, I'm giving my, it can give you a time to recuperate and say where this is going to go, and it gives the audience time to say, okay, that solo's done, and now what's this guy going to do? So I think that's a good way to start, is think about space, and then I also think about developing a melody. And some of you are like, we're drummers, we can't play melodies, but we can. And even, I'm not talking about pitching the drums and playing melodies. Ari Honig is amazing at that. That is not my thing at all. But I think that you can use melody, for instance, this melody right here. Okay, nothing life-changing, nothing crazy, but it's a melody. I can build on that all day. And when I first played it with the hi-hat, some of you might say, where's the beat, where's the beat? You don't always have to keep hi-hat when you're soloing. I think that can distract people, especially in jazz. There's this pressure of, well, you're playing jazz, so hi-hat has to be on 2 and 4. It doesn't. Listen to Roy Haynes, listen to Tony Williams. They didn't always play hi-hat on 2 and 4, so you don't have to either. But if you're not going to play hi-hat on 2 and 4, please make sure that your rhythms are tight and solid. And even though you're playing jazz, so there's a little more rhythmic freedom, that doesn't excuse you from having sloppy time, right? Doesn't excuse me either. I'm not just talking about you. I'm talking about anyone. So think about melodies, right? It doesn't have to be something crazy. I noticed that melody wasn't me blazing like paradiddles around the kit. It was literally a little 3-note motif, right? So I'll solo on that a little bit just so you can get a vibe of what I mean when it can grow, okay? So that same melody, I'll expand on it a little. So it doesn't have to be crazy. I got into a little bit of crazy stuff there, but none of that was meant to be watch my blazing chops. I'm thinking more of melody. I'm thinking more of allowing some space, allowing some phrasing to happen. I think the best thing you can do when you're soloing in jazz is think about a saxophone player, think about a trumpet player, they have to breathe. They can't just play 17 measures of 30-second notes without breathing like we can, like guitar players can, like piano players can. So think about, if I were forced to breathe, where would I have to stop these notes, right? That can be a good thing too. So, extended soloing in jazz, that's what I've got. All right, question 3. Adam asked me, I haven't talked about sextuplets or quintuplets, and in 4/4. So I think that the coolest way, you can do this in jazz, you can do this in any style of music, but I think the most important thing about sextuplets and quintuplets is being able to feel them against 2, right? So a lot of times when we think about triplets, when we're learning triplets, we immediately say, okay, you want to learn triplets, here's 3 against 2, here's 3 against 4. But we never do that with quintuplets, and we never think about sextuplets that way either. Or at least I was never at first taught sextuplets. This is how it sounds against 2, right? So if you're in 4/4 and you're going to play sextuplet, that means you're playing 6 notes in one beat. So if your quarter note is here, 1, 2, 3, 4, then to play 6 against 2 is pretty easy, because now you're just taking your quarter note and dividing it into eighth notes and then playing 3 notes for each eighth note. I know it's a little bit of math, but 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. Right? So that's the way I like to think about sextuplets and quintuplets. And putting 5 against 2, so learning to put 5 against 2 will really help you feel 5s in 4/4, just like you feel 3s in 4/4, because triplets we learn against 2, so if you learn 5 against 2, you're better off. The way I did that, honestly, is I plugged it into Logic, and now I have an app on my phone that'll play 5 against 2, and I would just practice. I would practice getting 5 on one hand, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then try to get the other hand to play 2. It wasn't easy, and honestly, it was just a matter of me learning where things line up. So the hard part is get a metronome that will play 5 against 2, which Tempo Advance by Frozen Ape, I don't know, I'll put it in the description. Frozen Ape makes an app called Tempo Advanced, I think, and that to me is the best way to learn 5 against 2 so that you can start playing a 4/4, because the problem is why people don't play quintuplets more often is because, not because it's weird, it's no weirder than 3 against 2, we just never hear 5 against 2, so we have no ear for it. Start to get a metronome that will play it so that you can internalize it, and then try to work it out that one hand does 2, one hand does 5, and when you can do 5 against 2, you'll be able to start playing those things in real musical situations because you can feel it against a pulse. So those are my 3 questions for this week. I'll do this again. Follow me on Instagram at Tim Buell so that you can be sure to try and get your question in, or leave a question in the comment, or send me an email, whatever. I'll get to your question somehow, some way, or that's my goal at least. So thank you for watching. Subscribe if you want. Share this video if you want, and check out my website for a bunch of stuff like this. That'll be in the description. So that's it for 3 questions. I'm gonna get out of here. See you later.